Welcome to the March 24, 2021 Parks and Recreation meeting. This is a teleconference meeting with commission members, city staff, and members of the public participating remotely to ensure proper social distancing in this federal, state, and local emergency. I would like to introduce the staff and commission members present. Commissioners present include myself, Jennifer Baskin, Dana Payne, Jennifer Johnson, Christopher Harris, Peter Diepenbrock, and Mark Bryman. Commissioner Sarah Staley-Shank as well, went out of order here. And Library and Community Services Director Sean Reinhart, Assistant Community Services Director Adrienne Lee Bird, and Senior Office Assistant Linda Mungia. Under public comment, the public may address the commission on any subject not listed on the agenda. Each speaker may address the commission once under public comment for a limit of 3 minutes. Please clearly state your name and address or political jurisdiction in which you live. The commission cannot act on items not listed on the agenda, and therefore the commission cannot respond to non-agenda issues brought up under public comment other than to provide general information. Linda, do we have any public comment?
So if any members of the public would like to address the commission on a topic that is not on the agenda, go ahead and use your raise hand feature and I will unmute you. And for those members of the public who are calling from a landline or a cell phone, go ahead and use the press the *9 to raise your virtual hand and I will unmute you. I don't see anybody.
I do not as well. So we will move on to D1 under presentations. We will be receiving an update on projects from the Capital Improvement Program as related to the Parks and Recreation Facilities Master Plan update. And the presenter here is Senior Civil Engineer Karen, I hope I don't mess up your last name, Packmeyer.
That was perfect.
It's been some time, so thank you.
Wow.
Thank you for joining us.
Rarely happens that someone gets my last name pronounced correctly, so thank you. So thank you all for having me tonight. And I remember at least half of you because I was the engineer that was working on Nealon Park Playground. And I came to one of your meetings, I guess it was at least a year and a half ago now. So happy to have that one done. And it's reopened again and kids are enjoying it. So we are now focusing on the next two funded playground projects, which are Burgess Park and Willow Oaks Park. So I will share my screen. My presentation is just very short and simple, but I'm really here to answer questions if you guys have any of those. So it is only a few slides. Let's see here. Okay. Can everyone see my screen okay? Okay, great. So Burgess and Willow Oaks Parks, we are going to be doing improvement projects at both parks. Burgess will only be the playground itself, and it's obviously a lot smaller than Nealon Park was, but we are going to have the same type of principles where we are going to try to incorporate all-inclusive features. We're going to choose a theme for the park and get input on that, of course, and feedback during the outreach process, and kind of just upgrade the playground in general. No other parts of Burgess Park are being done as part of this project. It's just the design phase of the playground itself. And then the second park, Willow Oaks Park, we're going to be doing similarly all-inclusive playground upgrades. The second portion will be the dog park enhancements. The third is going to be the restroom, which we're finally pushing forward with. And then lastly, this was actually part of our transportation team, but they've asked us to include it in this project, is the bike and pedestrian pathway that's already there. We're gonna upgrade the path itself just for connectivity from the park to past the school area and to the neighborhood. And here's just a picture of each park. So you can take a look at what they currently look like, the Burgess Playground and the Willow Oaks playgrounds. So I really wanted to just, like I say, open up to questions, because I know you guys have been involved in the past, and there's been a lot of feedback, and some of those comments that have been incorporated in the past, we're going to be moving forward with on these projects as well. And I also just wanted to mention the basic timeline right now is we're really at the early stages of this. Calendar and Associates is going to be our consultant, and they are on board, and we're right now in the early phases of starting the process to outreach to the community. And we're working with our public engagement manager, and he's pretty much, helping us, directing us on the best ways to get feedback from the folks out there that are the park users, the dog park users, the schools, the people that want the restroom, so everything we're going to be focusing on is gathering the feedback in the best way possible. The plan also was to include you guys in the outreach. The idea was that we would, at the very least, be showing you all, before we show the public, what we're going to be asking of them, which mainly it's going to be the theme of the playground. We want to see if they have any idea. We have a few options that we'll give them, but a nature theme is a potential, treehouse theme, things like that. And then the other piece that we would like feedback from the community is the play features themselves. And those are like the swings, the spinners, what type of equipment they would like to see at their playgrounds. So at that point, we'll loop you in, we'll get feedback. That'll be the whole outreach part of the projects, which will generally be, we're thinking, the next few months. So April, May, maybe into June, because we would like to do 2 rounds of outreach. And then we would have our consultant give a formal presentation to the commission later summer to basically report back on what everyone wanted and what they're going to start the design with. So at that point, the design pretty much will generally go through summer into fall, with the hopes of construction by early next calendar year, like by January, February. So that is my super brief presentation, but if you have any questions, let me know, and I will be at least happy to try to answer them.
Before we ask any questions, Linda, do we have any public comment on this item?
If any of the members of the public would like to address the commission on this agenda item, go ahead and use the raise hand feature. And again, if you're calling from a landline or cell phone, use press star 9, and I will unmute you. I don't see anybody.
I agree. So I'll open it up to the commissioners here. Does anyone have any questions for Karen?
Hi, Karen. I'm Sarah Staley-Shank. And a question I have is, I guess it was 4 years ago, we debated and approved the design of the restroom. And then maybe 3 years ago, the dog park elements. Do those remain intact as part of this design, or will those again be revisited?
That's a good question. And those will remain intact. And I do have record of what went out to the community, what was voted on, and then what went to the commission and was voted on. So just to recap, since it was a few years ago, I think it was in 2017, for the restroom specifically, the roof shape was chosen as option 1, which was a pitch shape of roof. The roof material was going to be metal. The surface materials of the walls are horizontal siding, and then the color was option 2, which is a light gray. So we're planning to move forward with those since they were voted upon and approved. Similarly, for the dog park renovation, they did talk a little bit about the addition of the shade and addition of shades, shade structure, and then also increasing the width of the granite path. So the answer is yes, we're going to move forward with those.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Hi, Karen. This is Christopher.
Hello.
Hi. Uh, we have a youth advisory committee here with the city, and I'm curious to know if they'll have the opportunity to be involved as well.
Yes, definitely. They would be on our list for sure because they are, the youth of the area. And I've seen some of the responses on the meetings that they've had. They've been pretty successful. So we would like to loop them in and get their feedback as well.
Karen, it's Mark Bryman. I have a quick question. I'm wondering, I wasn't really part of the commission here when you guys were working on Nelon, but now that you have and you've had time to get response on it, is there any part of the Nelon project that you feel that you've learned from that we should maybe avoid or not?
Yes. Well, on the engineering side of things, we definitely learned a few things. One being that it's fairly important to get a survey of the area and the park itself, the playground specifically. When we did Nelon, and actually when I came on board, we were almost construction, so we were in design build. It didn't have a topographic survey, so we're definitely going to get one this time, and it's close to being done. The consultant's working on that now. The other part is like a geotechnical review. So those things, when you start the project, you know what's underground, you know what you might be running into. It really is helpful. So those were two big things that we definitely learned from, because we did unfortunately come up with a few PG&E and other issues that we could have avoided had we had the survey and knowing exactly where your lot lines, and don't just trust what's inside the fence. So those are two
I didn't
things.
I didn't so much mean construction issues as elements of the playground where now you've actually gotten feedback based on what's actually there, not just a concept. In terms of from design to actual use, I'm trying to get a sense of if you've gotten any feedback from the public about, I don't know, just how things may sort of change in transition.
Yes, and in terms of the equipment itself, the playground equipment, one piece in particular, the overhead, what do you call it? Yes, the zip line.
The zip line.
That you probably have heard. There's been a lot of comments once that was installed that just the neighbors nearby are hearing noises, and there was like, are there safety issues? So that piece, for example, is one that we've learned from, that everybody thought it was going to be the greatest thing ever, and wow, what kind of playgrounds
Right.
have zip lines? And then you kind of see in reality what it ends up to be, and you obviously first and foremost don't want a safety hazard. Secondly, you want to have the park users and the neighborhood happy. So those type of things we're taking into account and definitely have learned from on Nelon.
Great, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Karen, one other thing, when we went through the Nelon project, for when we were doing community engagement, and I thought it was actually a very successful and really helpful, was we had the community come out and meet and look at different features of the playground, vote for things, be engaged. Members of the city council attended. I thought it was a really nice way to present what we all were doing, what you were doing, and actually get feedback from users that were passionate about it. And I think a lot of that feedback went into the park and are actually working really well. I just wonder, are there, given the environment there is right now, are there some plans to be able to do something that is live like that, and maybe not just virtual, to engage the community on these projects?
Yeah, and the original plan with the consultant was definitely to do live meetings and have them out there and seeing things and voting on things. In the last few months, we're like, let's just plan both ways. We'll do virtual and in person, because we're not really sure what's going to happen. So the consultants kind of prepared for both. But I agree, if we are, physically able to have people there in person, that would be obviously better and great. I think it just depends on, things are moving the right direction, so that's good. But I think it depends on where we are, in the next few months.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Are there any other questions for Karen? Really appreciate the update. Thank you very much.
Sure, and we look forward to working with you all. It'll be exciting 2 projects.
Wonderful.
Karen.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank you,
you.
Karen.
Take care.
Next on the agenda will be the dedication program presentation. Presenter for that will be the Parks Supervisor or Public Works Supervisor, I thought, Bill Halleck.
I will also bring in Brian Henry, the Public Works Assistant Director.
Wonderful. Thank you. Welcome, Bill. Welcome, Brian.
Hey, hello.
Hi, how are you?
So I'm Bill Halleck. I'm the Park Supervisor. And it's nice to meet you all. And Linda, thank you so much for working hard to try and get my presentation working. So I hope it works, right?
No, I wasn't able to get it actually.
Right. So we'll make it happen. Share my screen here, and I think I'm going to do screen 2. And now that you can see my desktop, right?
And Bill, I'm being told that you should choose side-by-side gallery view so viewers can also see the commissioners if you haven't chosen that view already.
I see all the commissioners there. Yes.
Yes, perfect. Okay,
I think.
great. Thank you.
Yeah, I see everybody except I have to scroll down, but
Oh, perfect. Yep.
I've got it. Let me make sure I've got this correct here, and let's get going here, right? Right, does that make sense? Can you see all that?
Yes.
Okay, so some of you may have gotten calls from people in the parks, and what we're going to talk about tonight, or what I'm going to talk to you about, is the commemorative park memorials. And that has to do with people who have had loved ones that have died and they want to have memorials in the parks. And we used to have 1 or 2 a year, and it's now gotten to be about 8 every month. It's going up. There's a lot. I have a spreadsheet, and so it's taken a lot of staff time and my time and Brian's time, but we're working on that. So what I wanted to talk to you about was that naming process and give you some examples. Okay, and so we have about 400 acres of parks, and the most desirable park to have memorials in them is Sharon Park, as many of you probably already know. And it's beautiful, right? And we have other parks. And so here's the process, right? Somebody wants to remember somebody, so they give us a call. And we normally have a bench style picked out for them. And they work with a supplier and a contractor that we help them select, and they get the bench and they have it installed and they pay for it. But Sharon Park has been overrun, and we really don't have much more area for that. So what's happened is we have had to look at different ways of doing that. But I'm going to go through like what we do now, and I can give you some options of what we're doing now with other parks. So here's an example of a bench, a memorial bench. And our standard is this Dumour bench, which is a nice steel bench. We're using black now because it's a little bit more formal and nice. And then we work with the consultant and the supplier, and this one's Dumour. And they come up with a plaque, and we work together with them on the plaque so that we don't get plaques like this, right? We all like parks, but You know, some people don't, but we want to make sure that what's said is pretty good. And so we do. We come up with really nice, or, you know, people come up with really nice sayings or whatever. And this is Bob Dressler's, which is in Sharon Park. And that gives you a great example of what people do. And as you know, in Sharon, we've got benches all over the place, right? We've got memorial benches and we've had a difficult time. And so I've had to spend quite a bit of time coming up with new standards for parks. And I think I've got some really great ideas. We're coming up with kind of really new sleek benches and concrete benches and different options. And that just meant we had to spend a little time on that. And luckily, in other parks, we have opportunities for benches too. This is Lyle Park. Many of you know there are benches all over. But just as an example, we have places where we can put benches and we can get memorial benches in. In Sharon Park, here comes the opportunities. We have old benches and they definitely need to be replaced. And so this gives us an opportunity to have memorial benches. And we have worked with Dumore, and they've come up with a nice steel bench that looks like that. And we can have a memorial plaque in the top. This one is in Lyle Park, but it's a good example of what we're going to be using. Another is a concrete bench. And I've worked with this company, and they've come up with an ability to imprint or get a hole in the top of the bench, you know, a nice little imprint place for a plaque. But in this process, they don't work with a consultant, maybe with a homeowner on the bench, that we would have to work on them to make sure that they get a plaque that fits that size. And we send them to a manufacturer on a website, and they would then pick that in there. It's a little bit more work on our part. But these are really kind of great industrial park benches that are never going to fade and go away. So we have a couple of options in parks that at least we've begun to get some different things for people. Other things I wanted to, that's kind of it, right? I wanted to also talk to you about memorials in general. What we've gone away from are memorial rocks or artwork. Some of you may know in Seminary Oaks, there used to be a cat memorial to the cat lady that was there. And that art piece is long gone. So what we aren't able to do is recreate art or have an artist recreate something when we're all long gone. Here's an example. We dug this out of Sharon Park. It was buried in the soil and it says number 3 son. And we have no idea where this was, what it meant, or anything like that. So it gives you an example. Trees may die, things may move on, but we don't want to do plaques to those things because it's difficult. Another option for people is to do trees. It's a much less expensive option, and they can have a tree planted in a park. And we usually send them a photo of it with a map and a nice little statement that says we've planted this tree and it blooms during the time of their choosing and in a location that works with them and the city arborist. That's about $500. The process with the benches and the picnic tables is about $7,000. And that's the cost for the bench plus the concrete footing. And we work together closely with all the residents to come up with like the best way to do it. We work with the contractors. We give them a couple of contractors they can select with. And I work closely with them. So we walk around the benches. Most recently, some of you may have known Barbara. She worked with me and we got a good option out at Sharon Park for her. She's actually found some good locations near the playground that she's going to put a bench in. And she said it's the first time that she's ever felt good in a very long time. And I was glad to help her. And so there you have it. It's just a kind of a basic little quick overview of the whole process. And I wanted to open up to questions. What do you guys think?
Thank you so much, Bill, for that. We were really excited to hear about this. Before I open up to any questions, do we have any comments from the public on this presentation?
So if any members of the public would like to address the commission on this agenda item, go ahead and use the virtual or the raise hand feature. And if you're calling from a landline or cell phone, press *9 and that will raise your virtual hand. I do not see any.
I do not as well. Thank you. Thank you, Bill. And I really appreciate, I know that I personally have received requests from community members and Barbara most recently. So I thank you very much. I think everyone was heartfelt about that. Really appreciate you finding a solution to that.
Yeah, and Barbara's a
And-
great person. Great. She's really great.
Oh, I love the feeling of happiness that we can do at these meetings and accomplish something like that. That's both great for our city and great for someone. I guess I have two questions on this. And you may have mentioned that, I might have just missed this. In general, when we have requests for anything that is commemorative, is it that the individual or community member is responsible for paying for it in entirety? And two, are there any other ideas that we are looking at, say, taking from, I think of Central Park, because that's, I'm from the East Coast originally, and there are a lot of other sort of things that they've used to commemorate over there, sometimes even, multiple names on a bench, that are also, something that we're looking at that might cost more, or we just haven't considered in the past because they were costly.
Those are all, those are great. And I came from the East Coast too, and I have like all of these great ideas, and I'm glad you brought that up. My background is in landscape architecture, and I can't help but come up with great ideas. I've come up with some, we don't have a way to, for people to pay into something. So we kind of have to have them do the purchasing. Otherwise, we're required to do a whole purchase order request for a contractor, and it takes a long process and everything else. That said, we are looking to buy a kind of a bulk amount of benches and tables and things, and just leave the areas open so that they can just do the plaques. That might help and defer some of the costs. And then there are different styles of benches. Like there are concrete cubes that are really cool, that you can put 2 or 3 together in an area and put plaques on the side of those. So I'm trying to come up with some brainstorm ideas for that. It does require a little bit of work on my part to contact manufacturers and see if all that works. Does that kind of help out there? I mean, we don't have memorial groves or anything like that,
No, that really does. I think if anything, this year has taught us that being outdoors and the need for sitting areas and features outdoors that could be used safely has really been something that's probably much more in demand and considered. So getting creative around that is a good idea.
It's been, I'm actually amazed. We went from like, one a year to so many. I have a spreadsheet, and Barbara was actually on the lower end of the spreadsheet, but her persistence brought it right up to the top, and she's great.
Well, we all could not be more supportive of that. Thank you.
Bill, it's Mark Bryman. I have a question.
Mhm.
I'm wondering, because you've made it clear that a park like Sharon is getting a lot of traffic, and we all know why, and people don't want to necessarily put a bench at a park across town that means nothing to them. So they want to be at their home park, as it were. What I'm wondering is, if there's a way to kind of combine the need and our need for improvements. And I'm not saying that it's any old thing, but to something that's going to enhance the park and the outdoors, it's going to be beautiful. If we can't maybe expand our horizon a little bit and allow those people to do some of those things for us.
What tell me more about that.
Well, if we identify needs at one of the parks, let's say at Sharon, right? We don't need any more benches. We don't need any more, right? What do we need? Well, we need this. Oh, well, that's not appropriate from a memorial, but this could be appropriate for a memorial. You know what I mean? We're not going to name bathrooms after people, but I'm just wondering if there may be a way to coincide our needs with their desires to beautify the park.
Yes, exactly. That's exactly what I'm doing. Because when we kind of ran out of benches, I thought, what can we do, right? And so that's why the picnic tables is a great need. And so I have at least 14, right? So that's where we're going to go. The Demore is a really great way. The steel bench, I think, is going to be really durable out there and it's going to look really great. The concrete's a little heavy for us. And Demore actually works with them on the plaque itself. So that's a really great kind of one and done thing. So the need out there is for picnic tables. And I think that's going to be a good option as long as everybody knows it's at the top and you can see it. I thought it was going to be like on the bottom where you really
You got to
can't
crawl
see.
underneath the bench to see the
Right,
flag.
but it's right at the top where you might be eating, or it's there. It is. So that's an option. There really isn't much other. Um, the arbor over there, the small one, was dedicated to somebody. I don't know if you know that inside the tiny arbor on the side, there's a bench which never gets any shade, even though it's under the arbor. And there's a plaque on the top, which I actually didn't recognize. I went out there the other day with Barbara and she said, "Did you know that was up there?" And I said, "No." But there might be an option to redo the aging steel trellis. That's the main focus out there that's kind of falling down. And as we move forward with any one of those things, there might be options to put memorial names on those. And Jennifer, you mentioned that, kind of like maybe we have a list of people's names on them, so yeah, Mark, I'm trying to think of every option, and I certainly could, if you ever think of something, give me a name.
Earlier in this meeting, there was a presentation about some of the playgrounds that were being upgraded. We need that. The public is calling for that. Do we have any of our playground facilities memorialized in any way, or is that gaudy? I don't know what's acceptable and what's not, but it would seem that there are options. Maybe even if you weren't planning a bocce ball court, maybe that's a way for somebody to, oh, sorry, I lost you.
Yeah, that's okay. So we, the policy that we have, which involves you guys, when we're naming a park, like when we changed Marketplace to Carl E. Clark Park, that comes to you for discussion and a vote. And so if we were naming a park or a playground or anything like that, then we would come to you and work with you on those things too as well. So those are all options: buildings, playgrounds, park names. Those things go to you, and that's part of the process.
Jennifer Johnson.
Hi, thanks, Bill. This has been really helpful. I appreciate your handling of that whole area for us. I'm not sure, Mark, if this is what you meant, but when I was thinking about this, and of course, Sharon Park is beautiful and it's great to be able to have a bench out there, but of course, at some point, we're full of benches. But as much as people love the beauty of Sharon Park, I think we have just as many people who love children. And
Right.
If, for example, if we're going to, if Burgess Park is going to be redone and somebody is saying, I want to memorialize, this person who is a grandfather of 8 kids and always took the kids to the park, be like, okay, well, here's some things we're thinking about. We need a swing set for that park and it's this ticket amount, or we need a, I don't know, whatever it is. Because if it was me, I would be thrilled to purchase a swing set for a playground, because that's something that brings joy to kids and that would bring joy to me. And frankly, I kind of prefer that to thinking about somebody sitting on me. So I don't know if Mark, if that's what you're thinking about, but just kind of, making a park by park kind of needs list of what are we planning to put in there, and when people want something in a particular park, is there anything in there like, hey, here's some options, any of these look like something you might be interested in. At Sharon Park, I know it's not due for a renovation for quite a while, and and I don't know if this has been fixed, but I've heard people complaining about it for quite some time, that the slide there was out of commission for a long time. I don't know if that ever got fixed.
Yes,
But
it got fixed. Yeah.
that's awesome. But, things like that, like if a family wanted to, well, I mean, you've already talked about benches out there, but if it's basically, one little play structure, and maybe a family wanted to say like, hey, could we fund a sandbox in the corner over there in Sharon Park? Just things like that, so that I think a lot of times it's hard for people to come up with what those ideas are. And we always think of benches as a memorial thing. But maybe to kind of have a wish list, facility by facility, and it might not be what everybody wants, but maybe that is another way of like, hey, we can get like, if somebody else wants to pay for the swing set at Burgess, that opens up like, $10,000 that we can use for other improvements that we wouldn't otherwise have a budget for. I'm just trying to be like pragmatic.
Yeah, those are
Jen,
all great
That's
ideas.
very much what I had in mind. Thank you, Jennifer. We're not going to have 90 plaques in the play area for every, the swing is one and but I think we can be smart and creative about it. Maybe it's just a single placard, and people who want to contribute to the playground via swing set or whatever else, who knows?
I had a nephew who passed at 10 months of age, and his parents created an all abilities playground in their community based on donations from people. And there is a big plaque of the contributors to that.
Right.
And that is on the outside of the, as you go to the Freeman Park. And it's lovely. And not only, where did they enable what was required in order to build it? There was a sustained endowment that keeps it running. So, when you think about how, the East Menlo Park, if you think about the things that like Ariaga and people have brought forward Facebook that then fast track a project, it would be beneficial if there was a process that also then enabled sort of this bundling of donation in a way that advanced our public parks, so that we're not, spending 4 years waiting for a bathroom or a dog park to come forward, and actually advancing the funding that's required so that we're not sort of in the queue, depending on who's in office for city council.
Those are all great ideas. There's lots of parts of me that want to scream out and say, we can't do that, or it's difficult to do that, or anything like that. But those are all great ideas. And we'll certainly have to keep these all in, as we build things and how we get names on playground equipment and stuff, we can talk with the manufacturers to see how those things are done. And maybe we have areas where we can put plaques in them. But again, as we get to those facilities, we'll be coming to you guys with that process.
Jennifer, I just had one quick thing. Bill, I assume that you've been to Magical Bridge and or similar parks. And, one of the things I've seen at several parks is the tiles, where the size of your tile kind of, if you donate $500, you get like, this big of a tile. But if you donate $5,000, you get like a larger tile. And one of the things I like about the way that they did it at Magical Bridge is that the tiles provide, not only we're honoring people who contributed, but it beautifies the park. I mean, the tiles that I don't know how it works in terms of who gets to design the images, but they're really pretty, and it just adds another like nice element to the park. And that might be a way of, anybody who's contributing into the park, it's all going in this one area. You don't necessarily say like, I paid for the swing set, but I paid this amount of money, I got my tile, and my money is in that park somewhere.
Right. And those are I love those. My mom lives in Delaware, and there's a waterfront there, and it just have bricks of all types that people have donated. Now we have to that'll be a process, and I know that the community services has to work on that in terms of how we might set up a program or a funding mechanism so that people can donate and those things get built, right? And for now, until we have those things, we just have the very easy way to kind of buy something and get it installed. But we'll certainly continue to look at those options. I certainly, we're putting in new bricks at the library, and there can be new bricks that are put in at Sharon, and those are really great ideas. Right? It's how we do them, right? Go ahead, John. You got it.
Thanks, Bill. On that point, and I haven't seen Magical Bridge, so I should go check it out. But I've seen many installations like that and worked on a few. And one element that is often present in a coordinated kind of fundraising donor recognition campaign is a nonprofit partner, like a Friends of the Parks or a Parks Foundation. Usually when you see that kind of installation, like there's usually that kind of partner there, and it works really, really well. So I just want to kind of add that to the discussion, because I think there's a lot of interest in that, and there are a number of projects in the pipeline, and the big one being the Menlo Park Community Campus. And so I just want to put it out there. I'm not aware that there currently is a nonprofit in Menlo Park that's like Menlo Park Parks. But it would, I wonder if there are people in the community who would be interested in forming one. I know on the library side, there are actually 3 such groups that had kind of organically formed in years past. So I just want to add that to this conversation, which I think is a really good one.
I think from a pragmatic perspective, because I think a lot of us are believing and saying the same thing. I just wonder if this should be kind of a recurring topic that we have on our agenda, is kind of taking these 3 issues and either one, thinking about how we market it, but at least 2, making sure that we're aligning on the projects we're working on, this waiting list, this list that you have, Bill, on your side, and the needs and the research that you've done. And then Sean, what you've mentioned, the nonprofits, and just making sure that that's always something that we're touching upon when things are coming our way, because it really, it behooves us to kind of marry these items together when there is money and interest and desire to do good, and we're also making improvements in all areas to try to marry all these topics. So maybe us being just more cognizant of that and making that kind of either a goal, I wouldn't say goal, but a side item that we're always kind of focused and working towards and considering. I'm trying how best we can make sure that we're not losing this, because this is these are great ideas. I feel like we're all willing partners in working on this together, and it sounds like there's interest on all sides.
More work.
If I may suggest, I know that the commission does kind of keep an agenda calendar and sort of a docket kind of running. That's later on tonight's agenda. Maybe we could just sort of park something there to make sure that it stays in the mix, and staff, we can kind of work with the chair and vice chair and kind of get a little more sense of how that might present. But we could add it there, because I think it's certainly a topic it sounds like there's interest in.
Great, thank you for the suggestion on that.
Jennifer, one quick thing, and Christopher, you might know the answer to this. You might have a better memory of this than I do. I think that there is one Friends group. I think it's Friends of Bedwell Bayfront. Is that correct? Yeah, no. So I think that's the only one that's specifically related to the parks, but there's no reason why there couldn't be more than that. So I just wanted to throw that out there.
And there are many individuals that have their own nonprofits that we just are unaware of, and maybe in his pipeline or out there looking to do something. Any other questions for Bill while we have him here? Well, again, really appreciate all you're doing, all your team is doing. Thank you, Bill. Thank you, Brian. Thank you so much for diligently responding to our community members who are very passionate. We love passion and getting things done.
Well, thank you very much. And I keep the parks clean for you guys, and hopefully they get better with every day.
We love it. We're there every day. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, if I may.
Oh, yes.
I just wanted to acknowledge that among the audience tonight, just as an observer tonight, Mayor Combs is here. I know there was some interest on the commission for the mayor to maybe have a few words with the commission. And my understanding is that he and the city manager are planning to attend next month's meeting for that purpose. But I just did want to acknowledge that he's just here as an observer tonight.
Well, thank you, Mayor Combs, for joining us. We really appreciate it. And appreciate you being on our calendar for next month as well. Next, we are moving on to regular business. We have the Parks and Recreation minutes for the meeting of February 24th, 2021. You should have all seen the attachment, been able to review that before this meeting. Does anyone have any edits or changes to those minutes? And if no one has any edits or additions, may I have a motion to approve the minutes of the Parks and Recreation meeting of February 24th, 2021?
I move to approve those minutes.
And do we have a second?
I second that motion.
Thank you, Christopher. And I will leave it to Linda to take a vote.
Okay, Chair Baskin,
Yes.
Vice Chair Staley Schenk,
Yes.
Commissioner Bryman,
Yes.
Commissioner Diepenbrock,
Yes.
Commissioner Harris,
Yes.
Commissioner Johnson,
Yes.
and Commissioner Payne.
Yes.
Okay, motion has been passed.
Great. Now we're moving on to informational items. We have the council direction on cost recovery policy, library overdue fines, and recreation user fees. And this is the staff report that was also attached and we were able to review. Sean, will you be reviewing that, or Adrian? Beer.
As an informational item, it really just presenting the report to the commission for your awareness. The city council received, I think, both these items at their May 9th meeting. And then they, because of the length of the agenda, they've been working really hard, tackling a lot of stuff. And so the items have been continued to future meetings for discussion. If it's helpful, I can kind of walk through the contents of the report to refresh the commissioner's memory for the discussion, or if you want to just dive right in, we're just here to answer questions. Your preference, either way.
From a very, if there were any more, I think we can go over very high level topics from there. We were able to all read it. And then obviously if anyone has any questions to answer that. But just the topics you feel like we really need to drive home, that would be great.
Yes, so probably the best way to go about that is I do have a handy little, just a quick set of slides just to walk through.
Fantastic.
Yeah, that might be the best way. Let me just get that on the screen. It's like kind of an internal document that we've been using, but it's just handy, and it actually covers both these items. So just as a quick refresher, so let me just see if I can get it on the screen here, which I think this is it. So just had this in the back pocket in case we wanted to walk through. So let me see if we can get this thing to progress the way I need it to. Fun with Zoom. Okay, you should be seeing something that says cost recovery policy equity statement. So this is the first item of the informational items. Just in summary, It proposes a few potential updates to the city's cost recovery policy based on some feedback we received from the city council at their February 23rd meeting. One was to incorporate a little bit more in an articulated manner, a statement about equity when setting, deciding on services and programs and establishing cost recovery. I won't read it all here. I think you had a chance to look at it in the report. So that was one of the things for their consideration. No action's been taken on that just yet. Also, some discussion about fines, user fees, scholarships, other ways to reduce barriers to access or financial barriers to access for all residents. One proposal that the city council seemed pretty well in favor of, although they haven't taken a formal action yet, was to eliminate library overdue fines. A number of jurisdictions have done that in the area. They did some studies before and after showing that they disproportionately impact low-income communities, communities of color, and that eliminating the fines doesn't really, it actually costs more in staff time and resources to collect fines than the fines actually collected. And that the purpose of library overdue fines is to get people to return things. And even when they eliminate the fines, people generally continue to return things. So it wasn't really an issue in those other jurisdictions. So that's one of the proposals. The other is to expand some of the targeted scholarship programs, for residents, who would benefit from a scholarship to access programs because of a financial barrier, to expand that as a citywide pilot program. Again, just seeking direction from council, should staff to develop that further and then bring it back with the upcoming fiscal year 21-22 budget process. So that was part of the question there, and would love feedback from the commission on this too. Another potential pilot would be to just eliminate user fees entirely for specific targeted populations and specific programs. For example, children in the preschool years, and specifically for like classes around music or dance, movement, introduction to sports, not including some of the services that have a higher level of care and investment, like a child care or gymnastics. Those are a different category. This wouldn't apply there. Mostly like, kind of like the classes and some intro to sports. So another potential pilot program pending council direction. And then another would be to partner with a local health clinic like Ravenswood Health Clinic, who could prescribe recreation passes for patients who are battling diabetes, for example, and some exercise is sort of part of their prescription. There could be a number of passes that that Ravenswood Health Clinic or a similar clinic could just give to their patients as another way to reduce the barriers to access. So that's kind of what was encompassed in the first report there, and we already mentioned the equity statement. Then the second report, just as a refresher. If it's okay, I'll just go through them both, and then is about some potential objective criteria for establishing when it's most safe for employees, their families, for the general public to resume some indoor access to city public facilities. Although a lot of promising signs with the pandemic, we're still in it. It's still quite a risk, and it's just trying to kind of get our arms around what's going to be the safest, the most prudent, until we're really clear of it. And protecting employee health and safety is really vital. And one of the things that we're looking at, that we were advising the council about and seeking any input they may have, is to look at the vaccination rates as a potential criteria, to kind of really focus on that. Is that according to health experts, that really is like the key criteria for when we can actually suppress the virus and put it behind us and resume to our new normal. So looking at maybe vaccination rates throughout San Mateo County and Santa Clara County as benchmarks, since we're right on the border, and looking at maybe particular targets. Most health experts all the way to the top, say once you hit upwards of 70% of the populace vaccinated, that's when you really, really have turned the corner. So that was, kind of what this one is about, getting that concept out there and socialized, and getting some feedback on it. Also, just considering that from a standpoint of equity, achieving that level would provide the maximum protection in theory, for all members of the community, regardless of their individual ability or age or wealth, health or demographics. That kind of gets to the vaccine equity issue that is certainly something that exists, as far as some community members to have higher vaccination rates, some communities entirely. I just checked the numbers actually the other day, like Menlo Park, I think is somewhere in the neighborhood of the high 20 percentile of the population age 16 and up vaccinated at this point. The number in Atherton is like 60%. So pretty substantial differential there. So that's kind of why looking at this metric is maybe being the most equitable and safe choice. But again, this is all, you know, informational and for discussion. Council hasn't taken any action on this at this point. And then looking at the phase-in and prioritization of facility reopenings, in addition to the pandemic, pretty substantial economic downturn and budget reductions really inhibit the capacity of the city to just reopen everything all at once. There are preparations that need to be put in place for the facilities. They've been dormant for over a year. There's some staffing limitations. And so, and there's also the likelihood that there will still be some level of restrictions, masks, social distancing, you know, for an extended period, even after, you know, the vaccinations have really had a chance to penetrate most of the populace. So, you know, just thinking about the sequencing of that and the prioritization, including those impacts that are in this next bullet point, and also making sure that we have a coherent and robust public engagement strategy so the community is part of that conversation. So that is the, in a nutshell. I hope that wasn't too lengthy, but just to kind of refresh everyone's memory at what was in the reports. Thank you. Oh, happy to answer any questions, of course.
Sean, I really appreciated hearing that. Anyway, I really appreciated that overview. What I heard from you also dovetails into the prior conversation about the opportunity to perhaps endow or provide sponsorship to enable other people to have access and even enable our programs to open more effectively if we did have funding from our community. So for example, you know, if when I sign up for a class, if I was asked, you know, would you like to sponsor another child for swimming? Would you like to, you know, would you like to endow a program or, I mean, a scholarship? Would you like to provide a scholarship amount this year as you register? I mean, things like that could really turn things up a notch. You know, our previous presenter, you could tell, you know, that his capacity or even the ability to scale what we need from our city is not always present. And so yet we live in one of the most, you know, rich places on the planet. So the fact is like, I think we just need to get a lot more creative in enabling greater access to our programs and asking people how they might like to be an active participant in that success.
Thank you. Great suggestion.
Jennifer Johnson.
Yeah, thanks, Sarah. I think that's a great idea. And, you know, even people who don't have means to give a lot, if there are options, I know sometimes, can't think of an example off the top of my head, but I know sometimes when I sign up for things, there will be something like, you know, are you able to spend $150 to sponsor someone else to do this whole thing? Or are you able to spend $25 to sponsor this, you know, let's say it's a recreation class. Can you sponsor someone to take the whole class? Are you able to put in $25 to sponsor someone to have one day of their class, and we can bunch those up with other donations? Or if, you know, are you able to give $5 to just contribute to the pot, and we'll gather that up? I think that a lot of people are really happy to do those kinds of things, and to be able to have a scale so that they can find something that's in their comfort level. And I agree with Sarah. I think that you would get a lot of people contributing that way. And given some of the concerns that you've raised in terms of the finances and, the city's goal of creating equitable programming, something else needs to come into play. In terms of some of the ideas that came up, the one of partnering with a clinic was not my favorite. And the reason for that is that, of course, that would isolate it to only people who participated in that. Whereas even if you're low income, so my son has Medi-Cal for a disability, but you can also get Medi-Cal for, being a certain income threshold. It wouldn't necessarily mean you would go to that clinic. And so I think that some of the other needs-based ideas that were in the staff report, I think that opens it up to more residents of the community. And I'm not saying I dislike that idea. I'm just saying I don't think it's broad enough to really benefit everyone. And then the other thing I wanted to mention is all of the cost recovery programs and considerations and scholarships seemed like they were all income-based or accessing public services based. And one thing that I would like the city to consider is that there are other communities who are severely financially impacted who don't meet those eligibility. So for example, people in the disability community. If you are a person who needs a power wheelchair and you need a personal care attendant, those things are not covered by insurance by and large, and you can be spending almost all of your income on just those things. Making adjustments to your home to make it wheelchair accessible can cost hundreds of thousands of dollars. None of that's covered by any kind of public assistance whatsoever. So I know some other programs in other areas also include people who, and whatever the eligibility would be, obviously you guys could come up with some ideas for that, but include people who have significant disabilities, just trying to keep in mind that their family's costs are so much higher than everyone else's that even though their overall income looks in the normative range, they're just pulled down by medical costs, equipment costs, all of that. So I just want to throw that out there.
Excellent input. Thank you. Oh, Adrian, sorry.
One question. Do you have any suggestions on a good way to vet that? Would it just be having Medicare, do you think, or no?
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Or access to regional center services or something. I'm wondering what you think the best way.
Okay, so the reason that I said no in terms of Medi-Cal is that there are families who have significant financial burdens because of disability needs who do not feel comfortable accessing Medi-Cal. And it isn't the case in California, but I don't know if this is, most states in the country have lengthy waiting lists to get on Medicaid, which is the same thing as Medi-Cal for California. I don't know in California if people are waiting to be able to access some of those services, and because other people just feel like, part of the reason about I don't want to take Medi-Cal, some of it's a stigma issue. Some of it is the only providers you can go to if you have Medi-Cal are people who are not really like the top of their game. You're not going to be able to go to the best orthopedic surgeon if you only have Medi-Cal. So there are different reasons why families who are eligible might decline that. Regional center services, being a regional center services recipient is one one area of eligibility that I think makes sense, but regional center services are designed for people with developmental disabilities. So people who have significant disabilities that are not developmental disabilities are not in that category.
Right. Yeah.
So trying to think.
I mean, maybe it's something we do more research on, but yeah.
Well,
you're
and
right.
it could, you know, it could
Physical
be a
disabilities.
combination. So you would only be receiving something like social security disability. I can't remember what that one was. You'd only be receiving that if you were over a certain age, or the other way that you can get one of those is that if your parents die when you're under 18. So it's hard for me to think of what's the one thing that everybody would have. I think it might be more of we're going to make a list, and if you check any of these boxes, then you qualify. That's kind of how I would envision it, just because nobody checks all of the boxes.
And I've also seen that with families with foster children also qualify. So
Yes.
maybe it's a category because, yeah. Mm-hmm. Okay. That's a great suggestion. Thank you.
So, so for us, it would be GGRC, the regional center, CCS, California Children's Services. They also serve kids who have some overlapping conditions with the regional center, but some not. Medi-Cal. Oh, I know a good one. Another one to add to the list. It's not a perfect one. Individuals who receive IHSS.
Mm-hmm.
Another one. Again, there are some people who might fall through the cracks in that list. So, I mean, I'm happy to think about it more, and you can do some more research on that. But I do think that including that category, because people with disabilities are actually typically really in need of physical, recreation services, physical activity, social activity, and just typically financially not able to do it. And what was the other thing I was going to say? And just, I'm not sure how familiar everybody is with this, but if you are receiving disability payments as an adult with a disability, you cannot have more than $2,000 of assets in your name. So most people with disabilities, and you can't access Medi-Cal if you have more than that amount of assets either. So most people with disabilities are basically kind of forced into a poverty situation because of the means testing for those benefits that has not been updated for 40 years. So anyway, those are some ideas. And I agree wholeheartedly, Adrian. I think that people who have foster children absolutely should be included. I think that is very often the case in other areas. And of course, we want to encourage people to do that.
Yes, definitely. Great suggestions. Thank you.
Guys, to piggyback on what Sarah was suggesting, I think is also an important part of the approach, which is that if you've got activities that people are already passionate about, they're going to be that much more passionate about helping somebody else do it, right? And so if we're asking at the granular level in that way, and as Jennifer suggests, giving them options on how to participate, it's not only the city granting it to them, but it's also a participation thing. And I think it just makes sense that people who are already excited about swimming, let's say, or whatever, are going to be excited to have somebody else do that or help somebody else do that.
Definitely donation at checkout. And when I previously oversaw a scholarship program, we did that. Our current system, and we all know we need to work on the current registration system, doesn't allow that. I had checked into that when I first started, but we need to work on that. So, but definitely, I think people like to add funds when they check their child out for registration.
But that's a perfect example. Think of it, think of how many parents would love to just contribute or fix the registration system. Like somebody's probably going, oh my gosh, I could have coded this in my sleep. Right? Like, why isn't that a request? Why isn't that an ask? Why are we waiting for, sort of capital or Q in order to make that happen? Just think that there's so much runway here if we're able to make it happen.
If I may, that's such a great observation about, technology can be very liberating and can make incredible things possible. And it also can be constraining, if it's not doing the things that you kind of need and expect. And in the case of the registration system, that has been identified in the, for a technology improvement and the technology master plan, IT master plan. But there are many, many projects like that in the queue. So there's a couple of pieces to it. One is the resources to do it, which is, those things they're not totally inexpensive. But then there's also the staff time needed to kind of facilitate, the migration and on all of that. So that's sort of what kind of constrains the ability to just knock out, because there are many projects like that all at once. The highest priority in recent months has been the city's financial system. And so that actually has been implemented as financial and budgeting system. But yes, on the registration system, there's a lot more that it could do. We're going to keep pushing on that and try to get it done sooner rather than later.
Any other questions on these topics?
Not a question, but I just wanted to say that I think the recreation prescription is actually, it sounds like a great idea to me. And I don't know if it's ever been previously tried to partner with some organization like Stanford or other local healthcare institution, but I can definitely see at least an opportunity for them to even fund or, provide some sort of partnership for funding like the scholarships or the prescription or even incentives for, I'm just thinking of my own patients, saying if you utilized this prescription and actually went and exercised, maybe we would be able to waive your parking fee at your next visit or something, something like that, just off the top of my head, but that seems like a great opportunity. And then I also love the idea of waiving the fee for the infant, like the younger classes, and could even see an opportunity for doing like starting that with like prenatal classes if we were to offer them to sort of foster a community. And I think people would be far more likely to be engaged with the classes, all the recreation classes, if they were to get in at that level and then make those connections and be able to continue them. I think that's a great opportunity.
Agreed.
Yeah, I'm very much in agreement with all the topics and the initiatives you're doing. Definitely the library fines, and I see that a lot of the communities around this area have already done away with that, and I do absolutely believe the logic behind that and all the findings, and absolutely trying to get community members and alleviating the burden of fees on participants in our recreation facilities. So. Very supportive of a lot of those initiatives. Thank you. The next informational item is the upcoming City Council consideration of objective criteria to guide facility reopening, service restoration, and the reactivation of programs and events. Also another staff report that we were able to read ahead of time.
Yes, and the slides I showed, the last slide kind of encapsulated that was related to the vaccination rates and sort of the sequencing and the other restraints on the reopening.
Does anyone have any questions on that? I guess my one question is, do we continue to remain guided by CDC guidelines in the state level, or are we looking more towards like San Mateo County? Especially, this is very topical because last week CDC changed the guidelines on school distancing. So we're just waiting to see how that kind of trickles down. And so just curious if we have real guidance on who we're following or how we're
Yeah,
being.
yes, thank you, Madam Chair. That's a great question. So certainly the federal and state guidelines, they would supersede any local guidelines. And in San Mateo County, generally the county has sort of been like me too with whatever the state's guidance has been for the appropriate color tier, and that being sort of a baseline, and localities could impose stricter requirements, stricter, I guess, but can't, impose less strict ones. The city's approach during the pandemic with regard to recreation has been to prioritize safe outdoor recreation, because outdoor is known to be quite a bit safer for folks to engage in activities. So when it comes to the outdoor things, youth sports, all those activities, basically just hewing to the state guidelines for the appropriate color tier. The indoor areas, risk of transmission is quite a bit higher. And the city has other sort of considerations as far as protecting employee safety, so the city is not reactivating, or has not been, like to the fullest maximum allowable amount that you might be seeing in, say, restaurants or retailers who have kind of a different set of considerations, economic being primary among them. And so that's just maybe in a nutshell kind of the current status with all the various restrictions that have evolved over the course of this pandemic and where we are right now.
Thank you. Anyone else? Any questions on this item?
I would only suggest that it would seem to me that it doesn't make any sense for us to try to reinvent the wheel. I mean, clearly the vaccination rate is tied to stability and success. There's no surprise that Atherton has a higher vaccination rate, right? I mean, I think we all understand why. Certainly age has a lot to do with that, if not entirely. But it would seem that we should be prudent and probably, I mean, it's coming, right? We're getting very, very close. I don't know that we should try to reinvent a wheel, right? I mean, if we can tie ourselves to vaccination at this point, that seems to make a lot of sense.
So there's been a big reduction in staff in community services. I'm not as aware of what's going on the library services side. I know that nearly all or nearly all temp, people less than full-time, had to be let go. And I think a number of full-time positions were also released. And I know that given the current budget circumstances, if I recall correctly, it's probably really hard to start bringing people back. And so I'm curious about what can be done so that we can, now that we're turning attention towards the, kind of, hey, there's a light at the end of the tunnel. How long is it going to take us to get back to actually getting folks employed again?
Great question. So the reductions were on the order of 15 to 17% across the board. And that impacted community services and library and really all of the departments. We are a service organization, so the primary expenditure is people, because that's what we do with people. And so a reduction on that scale, as you observed, because of the order in which folks need to be released in unfortunate situations like this, per bargaining agreements with our bargaining groups or labor groups, which we respect very much. There's temporaries to be released before the benefited employees, and the temporaries is quite numerous. Quite a bit of the programs did rely quite a bit on those folks who are amazing. They're great people. They're our coworkers. It was quite difficult to have so many of them, kind of have to be let go. So a couple things. That was a result of needing to reduce expenditures, as a result of the revenues just really crashing as a result of the pandemic and downturn. So that's why this discussion is taking place in the context of the City Council's budget process for establishing the new fiscal year budget July 1st, because any staffing, really, that's ultimately a City Council decision to appropriate the resources for that, while also balancing the budget, which is something that the City Council is required to do by law. And of course, that I think they really want to do because they are really good fiscal stewards. So then if that would be July 1st, that would be the first opportunity, because that's when the new fiscal year begins. Then, as you correctly pointed out, Commissioner Harris, there's a time frame needed to hire staff, to train them or call them back. And certainly I want to be clear, staff who were laid off as a result of this would be the first called back or given the opportunity to call back. Some of them, I'm sure, have maybe moved on to other things, which is a loss to us. So, there might be some new recruiting that would have to go on, again, assuming that the resources are there and the council, took action to appropriate them. So we're sort of at the beginning of that process to develop that new budget proposal to the council, and ultimately for them to adopt it effective July 1st. And so, those are just a number of the steps, and that I'll just quickly say that doesn't even get to like facility modifications, ventilation systems and other things, to prepare the spaces themselves, which also has a budget impact.
Sean, can you talk about the timing of the rebuilding LCS or staff reports that will be going to council? I mean, they're tentatively scheduled, but their agenda is pretty packed. But when is it? The 20th? No, it's not the 23rd.
Yeah, thank you. So we anticipate the next two city council meetings are on April 13th and April 27th. And both of those meetings having some level of something on the agenda for the council to discuss on this topic. Exactly what form it'll take is still being developed, but essentially similar questions as you're discussing tonight, talking a little bit more in depth about the public engagement strategy and a little bit more detail about the exact resources that we're talking about. What would we be able to do with current resources? And then what resources would be needed to get to maybe a place that maybe resembles the before times, maybe with some modifications and learnings like we discussed in the previous item, so that the council can begin that decision-making process. And certainly the Parks and Recreation Commission, we anticipate having this discussion with you every month at this point until we kind of finish the work and get everything back to where it's going to end up when all is said and done with the pandemic.
Thank you.
Thank you for the update. Next, we have the Menlo Park Community Center project updates.
And this is really a standing item to give the opportunity for the commission to hear any news that may have come up, and we do try to email it to you as it arises, or if there are any questions about the project. Right now, our primary focus is on preparing for the interim services, at least within the department. There are other teams working on like the building design and whatnot to finish that and for the start of construction this summer. So the main thing for us, Adrian and I and the rest of the team, Linda and others, are to prepare for relocating, reestablishing the services that are currently there in other locations, so that there's a continuity of services like the senior center, the Onetta Harris Center, and the other programs that are located there. So that's kind of our focus right now.
Thank you. Does anyone have any questions regarding the Menlo Park Community Center? I think we are good. So moving along, we have the Parks and Recreation Commission agenda calendar. Vice Chair Sarah Staley-Schenk and I reviewed this with, thank you, Adrian and or Sean for putting that up. I think one thing we should add before we forget about this is kind of a follow-up with Park Supervisor. Just, a check-in. So I guess we could put it for an unscheduled future item, a check-in on how we can best align with what his research and needs are and our project timeline and what we're looking to do.
What was that with Bill Halleck? Is that what you were
Yes.
talking? Okay,
Mhm.
great.
And it might even make sense when we are doing another update for the upcoming projects we have, or master plan or anything like that. It might make sense to put them together. So can put them for an unscheduled one until we find the right home for it in the
Okay.
next few meetings.
Linda, do you want to add that under unscheduled? So a check-in with Park Supervisor.
Mhm.
And just to let you know, we do have the storyboards completed for Carly Clark Park. We just got the final design a couple days ago, so those will be ready to come back in April to share with you.
And I believe we can move up Mayor Combs's place to the April meeting, I believe.
Yes. And I believe the city manager is planning to come along. So you can add that to April.
Excellent.
Linda, that is under unscheduled. It's the 5th item, and then we can bring it up to April. Yep.
Guys, may I ask a question? So I'm noticing these commissioners' reports that we have monthly, and I've been around long enough to know that it's kind of you just kind of choose something, you fly with something, and it's terrific. It's great information often. I'm just wondering if we may be better off kind of assigning the topic. In other words, if we have certain things that we want to explore, if in those commissioner reports, we already have a schedule and we say, okay, we'd kind of like to look into this, and somebody can, it's not going to be totally comprehensive, but it's going to be at least a start into an area that we're kind of choosing to look into, as opposed to just sort of a random one-off, oh, I went to the park this one day and this happened. I don't know. It's just a thought as we're sort of narrowing in on and focusing on priorities.
Mark, just to follow up, and for I'm sure several of us who've been around a little bit longer on the commission, we actually did used to do that, and I really liked it. I think it kind of kept us a little bit more honest about our responsibilities of doing a commissioner report. So it used to be that, well, one of the things that we would do would be look at the upcoming events calendar, and each commissioner would, volunteers were requested to attend each of the events, not one person for every event, but one person for each event, and then kind of report back so that the commission knew about the events, but also so city staff would be able to get feedback from the public, because we usually get, some of that information. That was one thing that used to be done. Another thing that used to be done pretty regularly was commissioners for Parks and Rec were asked to attend meetings of other commissions and city council for topics that were kind of very close to Parks and Rec heart. So for example, when I think Sarah spent some lovely time. Sarah, was that on the transportation, or are you with us, Sarah?
Yes, I'm unmuting. Yes, I
Sure.
was on the transportation. I was a liaison to the Transportation Oversight Committee.
And then also Sarah was a liaison, I think, to the Flood Park group. And so those things were really helpful because they kept, our commission up to date with what was happening with things that were very important and topical, and very connected to us, but not necessarily things that we would know about otherwise.
Mhm.
Somebody else was on this too. Anyway, I was one of the people who went to all of the master plan meetings for Parks and Rec, because they didn't happen as part of our commission. So things like that. I mean, I felt like when we were doing that, it kind of kept us all a little bit more informed about what was going on. I mean, clearly, if somebody goes to, to a park and says, hey, I had this conversation with some family members and they're really concerned about X, or they're really thrilled about X, that information is always kind of, that information is always great and is typically, thrown in comments during the meeting. But I know I kind of miss getting some of that other information that is quite relevant to us. So
What happened?
I'm a little bit confused. Are we, I got lost, it's my fault. Are we in informational items or are we in commissioner reports? And should I be doing my
Calendar.
We're in the calendar. So we're in the informational items talking about the calendar. Okay, thank you.
So I think the question was, where did that practice leave off, or where did it go, right?
I think it really left off on when we went into shelter in place and not, well, I don't know, when I came on, I don't know if you were still formally assigning folks to different events, but people were reporting out on events they attended. I think since shelter in place and we're not having the large community events, I think it's been more difficult, yeah.
Well, I guess I didn't mean specifically events, but obviously it could be that, but any topic for that matter that we're interested in sort of delving into.
Yeah, that was also done as well. So for example, in the run up to, it was a few years ago when it was time to kind of review all of the parks. There was a safety survey done of all of the parks, basically prioritizing which parks needed to be done first. That was brought to the commission, and I brought up that, I think we really needed to take a different direction so that we had, at least one park in Menlo Park that was accessible to all children and actually to all people. And so I got assigned that topic. So I did a presentation on kind of the research behind accessible and inclusive playgrounds, and also gathered some community input from the disability community about what things they liked about our current parks and what things they thought needed to be changed. And I think that that kind of gave us a direction to go in with Nealon Park. And I think we also used to have, this is not, I guess it's tangentially, no, it's kind of related to commissioner reports. We also used to have several subcommittees. And when commissioners were due to make a report, they would report back from their subcommittees. And then there would also, we have I don't know how often, quarterly reports to council or semi-annual, I can't remember. But commissioners would do those reports to council and would share that would kind of review all that information with the commission first to say like, hey, we're all good with this, and then send that on. So I think there used to be a little bit more structure around some of those things. And we also got assigned little jobs. When we had the, Sarah and I got, we volunteered. Kind of, when there was the thing a couple years ago about, you know, there was a competition of all the businesses in Menlo Park decorating their storefronts for the holidays. And Sarah and I each got a longer list than we expected. And we visited all of those storefronts and had a thing where we had to rate their decorations. And then, you know, that information was compiled and somebody won. So some of those kinds of things, I think, I guess in my experience, I think when there is a topic assigned or something kind of more tailored, I think we tend to get more thorough information, I guess. So anyway, so to answer your question, Mark, those are some of the things that we used to do.
Well, yeah, that was my point. I get it. Thank you.
Just so we stay on target here, are there any items that people feel from the unscheduled future items that you'd like to see on, you know, the next couple months? Obviously, we are subject to them being prepared by staff and ready to present on them. But this is kind of what we have set up for the next couple of meetings. And I think we focus on that. They seem like they're pretty full, but just want everyone's opinion and if this looks sufficient and we're not missing anything.
I just wanted to make sure that the park that's, I don't know the timeline at all, but the park at the Willow interchange is something that we'll be talking about at some point.
Yes, I think Karen mentioned it would actually be coming back probably next month for you to get the preview on what items will be incorporated into the 2 engagement activities with the community. And then following that, I think she said May or June would be a presentation from the contractor.
Great, thank you.
Great.
Adrian, I had one question. I have a recollection that there was something that was coming in the spring about inclusion policies or something like that, and that seems to have fallen off.
So we actually have made a lot of progress. I think we've locked in 5 or 6 offerings for spring. Well, spring is actually here. So the first one I think is going to launch in April. Might get delayed a little bit, April or May, but why don't we bring that back next month? Because we'll have the flyer and all the information actually ready. So we have the social group, we have a sensory class, we have a music therapist who specifically actually works with kids on the spectrum. We have a adaptive martial arts class and a yoga class to start off with, actually. So the staff made a lot of progress, which is great. So I'm happy to bring that back for April, but we're going to need to actually promote it before we come back because they'll be starting soon.
Okay, great. If we don't have any other additions, we can move on to commissioner reports. And our commissioner report this month will be Commissioner Harris.
Thanks, Jennifer. And we were just talking about commissioner reports, so that's a great setup for me. You know, I've been really appreciative of the opportunity I've been given from the City Council to serve on the Parks and Recreation Commission. And now that I'm nearing the finish line, as many of you know, I thought I would take this opportunity to share with you some Parks and Recreation Commission reflections. that I've had for my 2 terms. It's hard to believe. As many of you know, I started my first term back in 2014, and Charisse Brundell was the director of community services back then, and Derek Schweigart was the assistant director at the time, and they were both tag teaming a bit at the time on working with the commission. But it was through them that I was introduced to the work of the community services department and the kind of issues that they were facing and the kinds of creative solutions that they were continually generating. So I thought that I would just take a few minutes and just talk and share with you some of those reflections that include just a reflection on some of the issues that we took on, some of the many things that I have appreciated and learned from my experience, and then maybe close with a couple of considerations, going forward. So not too much time, but one thing that tends to happen, at least has been my experience on the commission, is a commissioner's term ends, and then that's it. We don't see the commissioner again. There's been very rare instances where a former commissioner will come back, and so oftentimes there isn't an opportunity for a commissioner to reflect on the experience that they've had. It might be one good use of commissioner reports is that when a person comes to the end of their term, that they have an opportunity to share a reflection about what they've learned or what they've experienced or appreciated from serving. So for me, it was, back in 2014, right away, and it could be the part of just the collaborative style of Charisse and Derek, that they were incredibly welcoming. And I really felt that they were trying to build and sustain an active partnership between the commission and the community services department. And they were both really highly experienced in public engagement. And you could see that in their interactions with us. And so I learned a lot right from the very beginning, just in the way that they interacted with us. And one thing that they brought to the forefront was, and I think they were intentional about this, but they were recreation professionals, and they are still recreation professionals. When they were with us, they were our recreational professionals, and they really saw it as a profession. Charisse actually was an adjunct professor at San Francisco State in recreation, and we would have some interns every once in a while. The city would, and but they brought that professionalism to us because I think that they recognized that for us to do our jobs well, we had to have some understanding of what it was to be a recreation professional, and so that we could give good guidance in turn back to them for what they were doing. And so for those of you who have been with us for a little while, you may have attended some of those commissioner workshops where we had opportunities to meet commissioners from other cities here on the peninsula, primarily from San Mateo County. Or perhaps you had the opportunity to attend one of the statewide parks and recreation conferences, right? And the intention was for us to develop our expertise, even though we're on this commission for only a short time. There was an intention for us to become knowledgeable about the profession so that we can in turn ask really good questions and give good guidance. Did we always give good guidance? No, but that was the intent, and I really appreciated that opportunity. And I know that they were doing this with support, of course, of the city council. So very appreciative of that. And one of the very first chairs that I had an opportunity to interact with was Kristen Cox, who became chair during my first year. And I had an opportunity to watch and listen how she interacted, not only with city staff, but also with the public. And I really learned a lot in listening to her, and especially around, when the public comes to a meeting like this, they're enthusiastic about something. Every once in a while, they're enthusiastic about something that's going really well, and they're coming to share it with you. But usually they're enthusiastic about something that's not going so well, and they want to share it with you. And from Kristen, I learned from her about the importance of being, not only acknowledging what's being said, but being thoughtful in your response to it. And sometimes being aware of how a slight action can actually be dismissive. And my first experience with this was early on in that first year, where a community member came and said something, and it was related to a topic that we were discussing. And I thought, oh, this is an idea. It's an immediate no. No, everyone on the commission's going to say no to this particular idea. And to my surprise, Kristen said, well, you know, we hadn't actually thought about this angle before. And then she turned and asked Derek, who was at the liaison for the meeting at that time, if he thought it was worth the staff time to investigate this a little bit more. And he agreed. And so, you know, here I thought, oh, well, this is really just a slam dunk. But really what Kristen was demonstrating to me at the time was that actually, you know, we have our due diligence. While it might appear that it's just a slam dunk right off the bat, here's someone who had this enthusiasm to come to the meeting. And it's actually part of our role to look into something further when things come our way, even though in the end, it still might be something that we decline to take up. We still need to take a look at it. And that's part of our role as an advisory body, to take the time and explore it. And actually that communicates to community members as well, that we have a care and thoughtfulness about what's being said to us. And I really appreciated that. I see some of those same qualities in Jennifer Baskin, by the way. You know, later on, it really, you know, that first year was really uneventful, right? Things really started to kick up in 2015. And that's when we started our commissioner reports as well. And as Jennifer Johnson pointed out, when we first started those, we actually did what Jennifer was saying. You know, people had assignments. I remember Miriam Pilevsky took on the role of visiting all the different areas of community services and just watching and chatting with city staff to see how professional folks were with the public. And she came back and offered some guidance for how the city could do a better job in interacting with the public. I remember Tucker Stanwood spent a day with the folks who take care of the facilities in the parks to learn about what they do from early in the morning to later in the day, right? To develop some knowledge again about how the parks were working. We could get back to that again. I think that Jennifer and other folks, you're right, that with the COVID pandemic, we've had to step away because none of us have been able to be so active to do that, but we could continue doing that. There were some issues though. There were a lot of issues that we took on. Some of them resonated with me, and I know that they didn't resonate with others, so this represents just my perspective. Our conversations around the use of pesticides in city parks, I thought was really important and engaging. Who can forget? No one can. The 2017, 2018 discussions on AstroTurf, on our turf fields, and the rubber infill for those fields, right? But perhaps the most substantive, that took a lot of time and a lot of thoughtful conversation and reflection, and then debate among commission members, were of course the issue of drones in city parks. Those are just some of the issues that I recall coming up that still to this day, I remember those. We've already talked a lot about equity and access. Right from my first year, this was a topic that the commission brought up. When it first came up for me, and I really first became aware of it, was when a former commissioner, I think Noria Zaslow, had been speaking as just a community member individually with Derek and Charisse, but then came back to the commission with concerns about the needs of adults with differing abilities and about how their needs weren't being met in city services, and particularly around programs, because they would need, oftentimes some adults would need another adult to come with them so they could be scaffolded to be able to fully participate. And so they had specialized needs, but yet they were having to pay a double fee at the time. And that really brought my attention to this, to equity and access, not just with adults, but more widely. And then of course, when Jennifer joined, it became an even deeper conversation. And there were other commission members too, of course, who took it up. That to me was really, and has continued to be, an ongoing issue. And by the way, equity and access, That's what we're always striving for. I'm not convinced you can always achieve it, right? And so it's important that we keep it as a conversation. It's something to be strived for and improving always. And I'd like to end with just a few of the accomplishments that I recognize that the commission has had. And when I say accomplishments, I recognize, do we really do anything? Yeah, we give guidance, we vote every once in a while, we have suggestions, we ask of things. City council makes decisions, community services that you have your leeway for decisions. But I felt that we were contributors to those accomplishments. And so I'm not suggesting that we take, full credit for these. We played a role, and I actually felt really good about what we did in those roles, even if the role was small. Carl E. Clark Park, for instance, really, I felt that was really from when I look back on my terms, that was really special for me. Nealon Park's All Abilities Playground. And I wasn't a key person in actually moving that forward. There were other people on the commission who really contributed and actually attended meetings and conferences and so forth. But that All Abilities Playground, I thought was really quite stunning. And then the idea for the Youth Advisory Committee, which I believe came up like in 2019, to see that now starting to get off the ground, I think that current commissioners who will be leaving in a year or a couple of years down the line might highlight that as an accomplishment of theirs, because I really think that that's just a wonderful idea for us. So let me close. I only wanted to take about 5 minutes. Some considerations going forward. I did really feel that the COVID pandemic, it disrupted all of our lives, and the commission, its relationship with the city and the departments. I really felt that there was an impact, that the role and the work that we do was greatly diminished as a result of the pandemic. And there were a lot of things going on, right? Our city council had a lot of things to attend to. We were looking in a lot of different directions, but I really felt that the role that we had was diminished. And I felt like we lost that active partnership that we had with the community services department. I felt I was the chair at the time, and I was not kept in the loop on anything during that time period. I was really not kept in. Today, I felt a little bit more excited and enheartened. Like I felt like, wow, today is feeling like a regular commission meeting. We had really rich discussion. So I'm really hopeful that that the work of the commission and that active kind of partnership that I talked about at the beginning of my reflection, that continues, that gets it reestablished. It's still there, but becomes stronger. I also, I know this is a time also where there's this merging of the departments, and that will take time. And so I recognize that, and I want to be I want to be supportive of that. I'm still not clear on the role of the two commissions now under the umbrella of one department. I do get a sense of creep, like I'm learning a lot about library services through my participation on the Parks and Recreation Commission. It's not a bad thing, right? And my assumption is on the Library Commission, they're learning about Parks and Recreation as well, and about the community services. And so it does seem like there is some integration or blending that's going on. I don't know if it warrants a greater consideration of, do we need to think more about the relationship of those two commissions? But it's something that might be worth consideration going forward. Anyways, let me close by just talking about one of the big lessons I've learned about, when the commission is at its best. In my view, the commission is at its best when we've got a really interesting, challenging problem to solve, in which there are different points of view, and we've got to figure something out. And we've had a number of those over the years. They don't come up all that often, but they do. And when they do come up, oftentimes you have commissioners who have different perspectives, and yet it'll eventually get to a vote. And those can be hard. But one thing that I've learned is that the commission's at its best when the commission members do take a position, right? But keep open the possibility that they might hear something from a colleague, a fellow commissioner, that might change their mind. And for me, I saw it happen time and again with commission members, where they would initially put a stake in the ground, but then after hearing a perspective, be willing to be open to changing their mind on something or seeing it from the other side. I think that's when we do our work the best, that it's okay to have different perspectives and even disagreements, right? I've had many good ones, particularly with Tucker, a former commissioner. But at the end of the day, I know that we're still good buddies, that it's all in the service of us working together to try to do something better, right? And when you have that in mind, that we're arguing because we're trying to do something better, then at the end of the argument, everything's okay, regardless of how it turns out. I think that's an important part of being on a commission, an important thing to take away. So anyways, those are my thoughts. I just wanted to share them. Thank you so much, everyone. I've really appreciated, again, I mentioned the city council up front because at the end, I wanted to mention you, that I've really enjoyed interacting with everyone. And, it's a being on the commission that, there are times where things are a bit slow, it can be a little bit tedious. And then there's these occasional times where you have those opportunities to have some big accomplishments. And so I've enjoyed all of those elements because the totality of it is what makes it worthwhile. So thank you, everyone. And that's it. I'm concluding my commissioner report.
Well, we have to give you a round of applause for that. And I just want to say that Christopher, you've always been a very insightful, warm, thoughtful, and such an additive part of the commission. And I've learned a lot from you. When I joined you, I believe you may have been vice chair. So again, taking the cue from you and seeing how your style of leadership and hearing things out and making sure everyone felt comfortable to have a voice. And I think that you touched upon the best parts of being on this commission is that you're problem solving and you're hearing problems and then you're maybe also, finding ways to make people happy, working with city and staff and the city council and public, members of the community. So really, really appreciate it. I hope this is not your final meeting. I believe your term goes until April 30th.
It depends. It depends. We do have a tradition of members not attending a session where they might get some kind of recognition of any kind, as you know.
Well, as we've been talking about maintaining traditions, we're looking to reinstate all the traditions. I'm fully expecting someone to do a day in the life of one of our staff members anytime soon when we're allowed to be now possibly 3 feet away from each other. That being said, that leads us into our final item where we have upcoming Parks and Recreation Commission vacancies. And we do have 2 upcoming, I believe.
Yes, we do have 2, and we will be acknowledging Commissioner Staley Shank and Commissioner Harris next month. But the 2 positions, there are 2 vacancies, and the application is due April 16th for that.
And I have seen them advertised actually in Menlo and on various other locations. Anything else? Any other questions for those items? Well, we have our meeting adjourned at 8:32 p.m. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks,
Thanks, everybody.
Thank
Good night.
you.
Good night.
Good night.